are specifically going to be hearing from residents and workers in the city of Richmond that are dealing with the issues surrounding drug policy and its effects in the United States of America. I invite you to join me in prayer. Jesus, the ultimate Redeemer, teaches us that we all have a need for deliverance. With meekness, we choose to restore our brothers and sisters, those behind bars, those recently released from prison's grasp, and those affected by drug policy in the United States. We consider ourselves when we reach out a helping hand to our brothers and sisters. For we understand that though we have not all been physically incarcerated or affected directly by drugs, each of us, at one time or another, has sought freedom from some sort of burden. Therefore, we employ the greatest power. We utilize the bedrock of our faith, the inspiration for the gift of Christ's life. We employ love with every initiative, every course, every program, every admonishment. For love covers the debt of our sins and drives out our fears. We seek the wisdom and help of God in all that we do, knowing that it is the Lord's desire to use us individually and corporately to minister to the needs of those around us and to help dismantle the unjust systems of privilege and power that undermine our lives. Finally, we know that redemption is possible and available, for we are living embodiments of Christ's salvation. With love and joy, we follow God's commission to demonstrate God's grace to all whom we encounter. Amen. Amen. So we have three outstanding panelists with us today. And I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves and answer our first question. That question is, how has the war on drugs affected your community, and what are you and the agency you are with doing about it? Anyone of you can start? Start with your name. And
then I need the microphone. Kamal.
Yeah.
No, you have it.
Yeah. My name is Tanisha Walker. I am a native of Richmond. I also work for the Safe Return Project, which is a group of formerly incarcerated individuals who have been professionally trained in community organizing and participatory research to be able to reduce barriers for formerly incarcerated men, women, and youth returning home to our communities. We work closely with service providers and other institutions to be able to change policy and create other supportive systems for formerly incarcerated people and their families. I myself am formerly incarcerated. I've actually been home six years and have been doing a lot of work with the organization of Cisco, which is Cross the Interfaith Supporting Community Organizing, which is a faith-based organization that organizes to be involved in issues that deeply impact the community. And the first question was the impact of war on drugs in our community. My original belief is that the impact of the war on drugs in our community is the separation of families. I think very early on I noticed that drug addiction and the war on drugs deeply impacted my family. I had uncles who have been incarcerated over and over again, friends who have been incarcerated over and over again. Due to drug policies, also When you systematically create a lack of opportunity in communities who are extremely underserved, the only other recourse to be able to support your family is to sell drugs. And so, and when that happens, then individuals are targeted and spend a lot of time incarcerated for drug offenses. Also, just the lack of resources to be able to support drug addictions overall. And instead of looking at people as humans and supporting the habit that they may have, that they need to be served for, people who are addicted to drugs are highly criminalized, and therefore our criminal justice system is being used to rehabilitate people, and that's not always the case.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Marilyn Langlois, and I'm a member of Richmond's Planning Commission. I just wanted to start for a moment before I talk about how this is affecting our community from my view, and just say one of the things we're really up against is the incredible hypocrisy and injustice of how the whole drug situation has played out in our country. Did any of you see the film recently, Kill the Messenger? Yes, if you haven't seen it, please see it. It tells the story of Gary Webb, who is an investigative journalist who uncovered some of that hypocrisy and was horribly demonized, and his career was ruined because of it. So, we know that the CIA, which is an agent of our government, funded by our tax dollars, has actively participated in bringing drugs to this country, while other agents of the government say, no, drugs are illegal, we're going to throw you in jail. Utter hypocrisy that needs to be exposed, and then the injustice of it, which we experience in our communities. Depending on your socioeconomic status and race, your experience with drugs are completely different. I know someone in Richmond who used to deal drugs back in the 80s, cocaine, and he said, oh yeah, my customers were doctors, lawyers, none of them ever went to jail. None of them ever went to jail or got into trouble. They were just, having fun and partying. And yet we see how the epidemic of crack cocaine in our poor communities of color have just ruined a lot of lives, and that's where the enforcement has been so severe. I also know one individual, a young woman, who just came from a really troubled background. Her parents had both been into drugs. She herself was an alcoholic at age 13, went into rehab, really came out of that, grew a lot from that, but still, was struggling. And in her later teens, she was able to get into the Richmond Build program and learn some skills and learn how to work with other people. She had been smoking pot. She got off pot, went to NA meetings, was able to get a few part-time jobs for the laborers union, and then a big opportunity came up for her to get a job for Gelati Brothers, the big construction firm. And in just, a moment of not really thinking about it, she was at a party with some friends, and she had a couple of joints. And then the next week, she went for her to get, the job interview, and of course, they had the drug test. And she thought she could, there are little techniques where people try to fake, didn't work. She didn't get the job. And she was so discouraged, she just slid that. And, it's an up and down, she's still struggling with it. But the point is, I hear again and again, our young people need jobs to support them, they want jobs. But this barrier, marijuana drug testing, is huge. And here again, hypocrisy and injustice. You could go home after work and drink a couple of martinis and have a half a bottle of wine and then have a scotch, and you wouldn't have a dirty drug test. But if you have one joint every couple of months, you can't get a job in a great number of sectors. So that's a real problem that we have to address. Where I see this come up just within the Planning Commission, just in the quality of our neighborhoods and our communities. We know that there are a lot of drug transactions going on all over the city. I hear again and again from neighbors, oh, down the block from me, there's this one house where we see the cars coming and going all the time. We know that they're selling drugs. And it's just impossible to completely stifle it that way through law enforcement. So the efforts to decriminalize drugs and go through education again would enable a way to get this kind of activity, illegal activity, out of the neighborhoods to make the neighborhoods safer, regulated, and have a possibility for the true efforts to address the problem through education and really giving people other options and other choices. And that leads me finally, the other thing that I'm working on is I'm a member with Tanisha and many others of the Reentry Solutions Group that has been trying to work with the providing more opportunities for our reentry population so that they can have good jobs, good housing, and good support systems to really move themselves forward in a positive direction. But ultimately, we do have to deal with these overall problems on a national level because that's how big it is.
Thank you.
How do you do? My name is Sam Vaughn. I work with the city of Richmond's Office of Neighborhood Safety. And real quickly, the question is how the war on drugs has affected the community. We live in a predominantly colored community. In my opinion, the war on drugs is literally a war on colored people. So anyway, the war will affect the community.
We might need to go around back and more like
I said the war on drugs is actually a war on colored people. And so any war in any community has devastating effects, and we're seeing all of those in this community as well.
So Sam, before you give up the microphone, can you tell us a little bit about the Office of Neighborhood Safety and what you all do?
So the Office of Neighborhood Safety is a department within city government. Our mandate is to eliminate gun violence in the city from a non-law enforcement standpoint. None of us have any law enforcement background. Most of us have very colorful backgrounds, to say the least. And we do it in a couple of ways. Our number one strategy is street outreach. We go to where these young people are every day, informing them the contact that they have in those communities with law enforcement. We don't have any agencies coming out there walking down the streets, communicating with folks, letting them know what kind of services are available, letting them know what kind of resources are available. So we realize that these young men are isolated and destitute and angry and depressed, and if we leave them up to their own devices, we've seen what that breeds, which is a very, very violent community. So we just try to let them know that there is hope, let them know that there is opportunity, let them know that they're just as talented as anybody else in this country, no matter what they look like or where they were raised. We let them know it's not their fault. They were just born into a dysfunctional family and a dysfunctional community, but it is their fault. They live in that dysfunction, knowing that, and we start trying to hold them accountable and let them become responsible adults in society.
Thank you. So, guest that just joined us, Mr. Soto, could you please introduce yourself and tell us how the war on drugs has affected the GO community?
Sure. Good morning, and apologize for getting here a couple of minutes late. I ran into my friend George Spencer outside, so we were talking. And so, yeah, I grew up here in this town, and I see my life as a slice of a larger continuum of history. So, we know that dating back to the Civil War, that's when morphine was really turned into heroin, and morphine was widely available and led to the largest, even to this day, number of morphine addicts, the Civil War, because it was widely spread as a painkiller, and then it was used in all sorts of concoctions to keep your babies quiet and all sorts of stuff, until the Food and Drug Act, right? What was that, 1906? So they started regulating that, but yet there was always this market of folks who were hooked, and couldn't get prescriptions for it because now it's a controlled drug. So that created an underground market. That was filled by primarily opportunistic children of immigrants, who in those days were Jews and Irish and Italians, and that sort of thing. So then come to the 1920s, and we tried to prohibit the drug alcohol, and that enriched those people into tremendous economic empires. The Al Capones and Lucky Lucianos and Myranskis and Bugsy Siegels of the world. And it undermined the authority of law within the United States. So then it was called the failed experiment. It was repealed in 1932 when Roosevelt got elected. So you had all these prohibition agents around, and now they were unemployed. So you got to find jobs for the cops. So what was happening? Well, the Mexicans had access to marijuana, and the Cubans were in connection with the South Americans and were having access to cocaine on a very minor level. So in 1937, they made those drugs illegal, which then, made it once again the forbidden fruit. And that's what attracted folks in other communities, African American communities, white communities, and there's the whole story of the culture of reefer, as they used to call it back in the 30s and 40s, and it was associated with jazz music. And if you've ever seen that movie, Reefer Madness, you'll see how they portrayed it culturally as a way to try to scare people away from it. Well, once something becomes illegal, once again, then there's an increase in the economy, the profit margin. And so everybody's got to do a risk assessment or cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not they're going to get into this. And so who's most likely to take the higher risk? Well, the folks who are at the bottom of the economic ladder. And frequently, those are the people who are structurally excluded. And in this country, because of the history of racism, certainly African Americans have historically been excluded, Mexicans have been excluded, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Chinese, and other folks. And even until World War II, as I was saying, certain what we now call white folks, right? The Jews, the Italians, Irish, Polish, these kind of people. So they entered into the underground economy. And I view those folks as the proto-capitalists. These are people that are excluded from the official system of capitalism, but they're eager and aggressive to make money. And since they're excluded from the formal avenues to capitalism, like Ivy League universities, they go to the universities of the streets. And this is where they learn their trade. And this puts them at risk from the way we enforce the drug laws. And as Marilyn was alluding to, and others have alluded to, it's, we use our local police as the front lines in the war on drugs, which means they're targeting neighborhoods where the byproduct of the illegal economy impacts people. So in order to engage in the illegal economy, frequently violence is used as a way to enforce the rules of the street, the laws of the streets, just like our national governments use violence in order to enforce international law. So fast forward, the impacts here in Richmond have really been profound in the sense of the impact of the Latino community. Certainly, Chicanos were involved in bringing in marijuana. I mean, people always remember back in the old days, Mexican brownie, right? Well, where did it come from? It came from Mexico. Who brought it? Mexicans. But the market was here with a broader community. Heroin was always a very narrow, small market, and while some Chicanos were involved in that trade with the Mexican black tar heroin, there was also the heroin coming in from Southeast Asia and from China. Well, then cocaine happened. And the explosion of cocaine, as Marilyn was talking about, in order to finance the illegal wars in Central America, right, to destroy the revolution in Nicaragua, then that allowed some of these people, especially Nicaraguan gangsters like the Meneses clan. I used to work for the city of Richmond. As soon as I got out of college, it was now called employment and training. And one day this guy came in, he had an unusual name, Jairo Meneses, and very clearly from an elite, not from a Mexican, rural experience. Turned out he was Nicaraguan. He was educated, he spoke sophisticated, he was dressed well, and we used to have, before the banned the box, there was a question on the application for the city, have you ever been convicted of and he had marked yes, and I asked him about it, and he said it was for cocaine trafficking. I said, oh, okay. And then I came to read Gary Webb's book, right, The Dark Alliance, about the CIA and the Contras and the cocaine trafficking. And then Killing the Messenger was about the aftermath of that book. And there it was. His uncle, Norwin Meneses, was the main importer and trafficker. He had been involved during the Somoza regime in Central America. And then when Somoza got kicked out, he moved up to the United States and he became the conduit for cocaine into the Bay Area. And his nephews, and Jairo was mentioned in the book, was one of his traffickers here. And so he was right here in Richmond, living in Richmond. And I saw what happened was that while in Richmond, the people who were smoking the crack cocaine were primarily African Americans, and you could go over the border to Sao Paulo where the Hells Angels still held sway and people were strung out on crank. These folks then started distributing it within the Latino community. It was always a lot cheaper within the Latino community than what they were selling to the African Americans or to the whites. And so people's lives started getting ruined. It was mostly powder cocaine at that time. But one of the aspects of it is with incarceration, that reinforced gang culture. And it turned people into gangsters who were killing each other in the prisons because of their loyalty to the gangs. It spilled out in the streets, and then they started recruiting the teenagers. So by the 1990s, both with the flooding of the streets with the semi-automatic weapons beginning in the 1990s, and then, of course, the expansion of the cocaine trade, and that's when we started seeing the gang warfare really build up. And in the mid-1990s is when we had the highest rates of violence. In Richmond, we would have 55 homicides per year. Most of it drug-related, almost all of it done with handguns and assault weapons. So within the Latino community, the gang life,
How many did you say?
55 on average. So now when we're having 13 or 11, of course we're still worried about it. The city still has a reputation of violence, but it's nowhere near what it was like during those days. And the school district had a role because when the gangs started emerging, they didn't know what to do with it, because normally it was little neighborhood gangs, that had always been around. It was more West Side Story type of, let's have a rumble kind of thing. But, when it started becoming, lethal violence, then they got worried. And who did they turn to? They turned to the prison system. How do we deal with these kids who are Sureños or Norteños or, Project Trojans or Sons of Death? And they said, you got to segregate them. And what that did was, at Richmond High, the Norteños, because this is Northern California, had always been the dominant factor, but the Mexicano immigration made the Sureños a larger army. And so they took the Norteños out and they put them in Nyanza High School, Pinole High School, Hercules, and guess what? They became colonists. And all of a sudden, places where they didn't have gangs, now the Norteños had sway. And so they actually helped the spread of the gang culture, just the way the prison system reinforces the gang culture. And so that's been one of the legacies, and I don't know how much time we're supposed to be going on, but I'll stop there because we'll keep on going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrés. So I want to ask this question specifically of Tamisha first and then Sam. Tamisha, can you talk about your work with reentry and how you all are attempting to engage formerly incarcerated people? What are the things you do and what programs you have and what has been the overall effect of it? Sam, I want to ask you the same question, but in the case of the Office of Neighborhood Safety, what specifically do you do with young men? Who do you focus on in terms of the work of the Office of Neighborhood Safety? And what do you think so far have been the results of your work?
In respect of full disclosure, the Office of Neighborhood Safety played a big role in the development of the Safe Return Project here in the city of Richmond. And we are very grateful to the Office of Neighborhood Safety for being able to support us in personal transformation, to be able to do this work effectively here in the city of Richmond. And so the Safe Return Project started off as a group of 9 formerly incarcerated individuals, men and women. We later were able to welcome 2 younger members in when we decided that we definitely wanted to support what we consider to be young people who were impacted by the criminal justice system, which could be between the ages of 14 to 24. So a little bit about the original goal was just to really do participatory research and community organizing, to develop a strategic plan for the city of Richmond, to be able to start thinking about what true service capacity could actually look like to support successful reintegration for individuals coming home from incarceration. It was supposed to be a 10-month initiative. What made it really innovative was that we were compensated for the work that we were doing. Most of us had only been home 6 months to a year. We're not able to gain employment because of our criminal history. And we all were violent offenders, so none of us were under realignment, 8109, non-violent, non-serious, non-sex offenders. None of us qualified as that. So it made it even harder for us, all individuals, to gain gainful employment. So in order for this initiative to be effective, we had to be compensated so that at some level, our most basic needs could be met. What we were able to do was develop a 125 question survey for other formerly incarcerated people, and over the course of 3 months, a team of 9 formerly incarcerated people went to probation and parole, surveyed other formerly incarcerated individuals about some of the highest needs of formerly incarcerated people in Contra Costa, mainly West Contra Costa, what we consider to be the greater Richmond area, which includes Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo, and the border of El Cerrito. What came out of that research was that the highest level of need was employment, housing, medical was on there, and people's overwhelming desire to feel welcome back into the community, but also family reunification services. What we were able to do was move our work forward in formal community organizing, where we engaged individuals in the community, had a community action forum that was also supported and highly promoted by the Office of Neighborhood Safety, Pacific Institute, which is a research institute out of Berkeley, and Cisco, which is Contra Costa Interfaith, supporting community organizing. And we were able to engage about 120 formerly incarcerated people in the survey. We were also able to host a little over 200-person action, where we were able to get commitments from the city of Richmond to begin to move forward and talk about what we can actually do to reduce barriers, especially when we identified that 75% of, it was a 75% unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people here in the city of Richmond. Homelessness, the percentage for homelessness was even higher because of policies around housing. You're actually prevented to enter into any low-income, affordable housing because you have a felony, and it could also deeply impact families as well. So therefore, that's why you have a lot of single parent households, because the father cannot enter into the home if he has a felony in most cases. And you have a lot of individuals that live with the family and are not on a lease, which puts a lot of families at high risk for evictions here in the city of Richmond. So we also figured that we need to also do some work with housing. I want to say what really made the Safe Return Project very successful over the last couple of years, being able to assist the city of Richmond in developing a bandbox policy. A year later, extending that policy to include city vendors, which made the city of Richmond's bandbox policy the most progressive policy on a national level. We're also able to, so this the box, have you ever been convicted of a felony, which is on employment applications, but also on housing applications as well. For us here in the city of Richmond, we were able to make a lot of headway by banning the box on employment, and for the duration of this year, the Safe Return Project is going to be doing a lot of research meetings and conversations with our new council about extending the ban the box policy to housing, which would also, again, push Richmond forward to being able to really reduce barriers to recidivism. Also, Richmond really led, especially West County, around realignment, which is 8109. We work really diligently, formerly incarcerated people with service providers, county, city officials, our local police departments, and others to be able to leverage a little $5 million to services for nonviolent offenders, to be able to support them in a successful reintegration. After about a year, we got an agreement for a countywide service network to be able to support formerly incarcerated people that were coming home under AB 109. The development of a community advisory board, which we now call a CAB, to advise our community corrections partnership and how to distribute the funds in the community. But also what the Safe Return Project has been able to do is really most recently engage other formerly incarcerated people. So to be really clear, like, we needed a lot of support to do this work as formerly incarcerated people. Outside of the compensation, just realizing the trauma that we had to deal with in our communities, the trauma that we had to deal with while incarcerated, and then the dual trauma that we had to come back to the community with. Not to mention the stigma, and also the reality that no matter how many policies you change or how many systems are developed to support people coming home from incarceration, you cannot legislate morality. And so these whole ideology around felonies and what does a felon look like, and the risk and the fear of coming in contact with a felon marginalizes formerly incarcerated people. So when you return home to your community, you're not welcomed. So we needed a lot of transformational support. We got counseling support through the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We had life skills training through the Office of Neighborhood Safety, trauma and violence training through the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We were also able to engage in the elder circle to get support from older African American elders in the community to help us be able to process and become healthy enough to do the work that we do. And so what we've been able to do, the Safe Return Project, is develop a curriculum for formerly incarcerated people here in the city of Richmond that is a 10-week intense leadership development institute that incorporates personal transformation, organizing one-on-one media and communication strategies to tell our own stories, to change policy, and ultimately to change the dominant narrative about formerly incarcerated people and who we are when we return home to our communities. The other thing that was really significant is that people have a need to be needed, and so the overwhelming desire of formerly incarcerated people to want to be useful in our communities has also opened a lot of doors for us to be able to engage formerly incarcerated people in volunteerism, reaching out to other people in the community, and building really firm relationships and also networks to be able to advance their own personal vision. Clarence Ford, who was one of our youngest members of the Safe Return Project. We laughed a couple of weeks ago because we considered the Safe Return Project to be a pass-through for individuals with a higher level type of vision. And so he wanted to go to college, he wanted to go to Berkeley, and he actually is at Berkeley right now, doing very well, and he is still engaged in transforming the dominant narrative. He still carries the work of the Safe Return Project, even though he is not present because of all of the transformation that we were afforded as formerly incarcerated people, and investment that was poured into our personal transformation as a result of being sponsored by the Office of Neighborhood State.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, for Mr. Walter, thank you. Just based on some of what you're saying about banning the box and housing discrimination for formerly incarcerated people, I'm given to understand that parents are being separated from their families by the box, so that they can't live together, and they're being denied jobs and also denied subsidized housing, and so their families then they can't live there. It's essentially dividing families. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, period. Yes, that is true. Actually, just knowing, now that I'm a homeowner, I don't have to worry about that, but for the last 6 years, back home in the community, I've always kind of had this like ominous, looming, because I've been on Section 8 housing, and for the last 6 years, and Sam knows this, I've been kind of like panicky because if they ever found out about my felony, which was a violent felony, I could lose my housing, and I promised my 17-year-old son when he was 5 that we would never be homeless again, and to know that at any point the housing authority could possibly find out about my felony, especially with the type of work that I do and now becoming a public figure or somebody who represents formerly incarcerated people like myself, was always afraid of being homeless. But not to mention that my fiance, which is my youngest son's father, he is also a felon. So for the last 6 years, we have been living together illegally, just trying to keep our family together. So he wasn't able to be on the lease. He couldn't really have any bills in his name. He couldn't have any mail come to the house, so he had to get a P.O. box. So in a sense, our family really didn't exist in public, but it existed to us, even though we were at a high risk because we were not supposed to be living together as two people with felonies in public housing. My 7-year-old loves his dad. He's never lived without his father. And so I can only imagine what other families go through who are also taking that risk, but eventually are found out and then face homelessness.
When we talk about strength, there's so much talk about strengthening family units, and then here's this policy, it seems like directly ripping families apart. And
who's actually talking about strengthening family?
I'm speaking sort of in terms of the dominant rhetoric that we hear media-wise about strengthening families. We want, we see families as one of the basic building blocks of a healthy society. But if these policies that we're talking about are ripping apart families, this is undermining one of our core principles. So, yeah. It was really enlightening. Thank you.
After that, I feel remiss not to just mention that when I said the war on drugs was a war on colored people, that's exactly what I meant. Like, this has been strategic. This isn't an accident of the policy. This was a part of the policy. It's bottom line. When World War II was over and all of the colored folks lost their jobs because they weren't building ships anymore and there was nowhere else for them to work, and they were destitute and they had no income. Welfare came around and they were like, we want to help you. We're a good country. We don't want you starving. We don't want you homeless. So here, this is what we can do. We build projects. We give you a little bit of money monthly. We give you food stamps so we know what you need to eat. But there's a caveat. You can't have an able-bodied man living in the house. We can't take care of a family with an able-bodied man that can go work. So that separated the man out of the house. Because any man who loves their family would love to see their family survive, even if it's without them. And that started the whole process of it's easy for a black man to leave the household. It was just simple. That's what we did. It came to that place. Crack is what took the black woman out of the house. That had never happened before. Right? The crack destroyed the mothering of the child, the nurturing of the child. So that's when the black community really went back. But, and Andre, great. I mean, I was amazed at it, but I knew a lot of that information, especially about the Casa Nostra, Pablo Escobar, George Bush. I mean, all of these things. It was insane. Freeway Ricky Ross. Why would I take somebody who has all the cocaine in the world, who speaks Spanish, bring him to LA and not connect him with somebody who speaks Spanish, connect him with a black man to take it all over the place, intentionally destroying black communities? I mean, this has been an intentional thing. This isn't you trying to change a policy that failed in some way. You're trying to change a policy that did exactly what it was meant to do. And there's a lot of people that aren't going to want that to happen. And sadly, because we were tricked. I mean, it was the Black Caucus, it was the Black political leaders who said we need this to be done, and it destroyed everything that they were fighting for. And so we need to be aware of why this took place. The criminalization. I mean, that's one thing we touched on and didn't. Every time a drug was criminalized, it was for a purpose. Heroin was criminalized because Chinese people were over here working on railroads much cheaper than the Anglo-Saxons were, and those Irish and those Jews and all the social medics, they didn't have money, and so it was criminalized. Hispanics criminalized because they work for cheap. Blacks criminalized because now the job pool, all these folks are unemployed, we all have felonies. We have two Americas. We literally have two Americas we live in. Most folks just see the America that they love, and it's beautiful, and it's so easy to pass a law and put somebody in there, tough on crime. You know how many folks have been elected because they said we're going to be tough on crime? Yeah. Well, tough on crime is tough on colored folk. And so this is what we have to understand. We're going to bring some up, you're going to get some kickback. And if you compromise, they're saying this is going to work if we add this, and this. I hope you have in the back of your mind, this, and this is where everybody's going to fall into those holes. And it's not going to be effective. So please, if nothing else, just be aware of that.
There's two questions I want to ask you actually related to what you were saying. And they both kind of relate to your work and the relationship between policy and violence. Because I'm from New York, and you know, drugs have always been in communities, and they're not just in Black and brown communities, they're in all communities. But there's a relationship between the laws that we passed and the level of violence in the community. So in New York, we saw a real shift after they passed the Rockefeller drug laws in the involvement of young people in the drug trade, which had not been common before that. And with them and the increase in guns came a lot more violence, in part because young people are less responsible with guns, you know, in terms of interacting, dealing with their disputes. And then in addition to that, there is a relationship, I think, between policing and violence, in that part to me of the, how can I put this, the sort of miasma around the drug war is that we operate as if there isn't as much drugs in affluent white communities as there are in Black communities. And we point to the police and the violence as the reason why we have to be there. But there's a relationship between the police being there and there being more violence. Because the police being there is what triggers the turf wars that gives the violence. So I wonder whether or not, in terms of working on safety, if you actually look at that relationship between policing specifically and the level of violence related to the drug trade.
As I said before, I'm a City of Richmond employee. I have a wife and a daughter that I need to make sure I take care of in 2 weeks. Well, I won't, I mean, what I will say is something that I would say if I knew it was going to be public, as I'm sure it is. So,
okay.
The police, no, in all honesty, let's just speak in general. The policing system in America is broken. It's just completely broken. And especially in urban America with folks of color and destitute. If you don't want to say it's a race issue, okay, let's just be politically correct and say it's a class issue. but most of the folks in that class are also colored. But yes, it's part of the structure that folks have been dealing with for decades. The colored community don't trust police, because every time police have been there, historically, is to take pops out of the house or to evict them because they haven't paid rent, or to take somebody to jail because they're protesting, or they come and they take off their uniform and they put on the Klan suit and they come and drag somebody out of your house and they hang them and burn them in the front yard and let them know this is how we deal with stuff right here. So it's going to be a long-lasting, trusting relationship with law enforcement until something takes place. Something drastically has to take place. In some communities, because you have an individual who doesn't care about politics, who wants a community to be healthy, who wants a community to be safe, they have a chief that thinks outside the box, and they're able to get great things done. They had a great chief from East Palo Alto who was doing amazing work in that community, and it changed the dynamics of that community. And now TC took him, and I don't know what he's doing up there. Hopefully he's getting some policies to every police department is running through strategies. But most folks, just to be honest, most folks do things that go off the buzzwords, they go off all these things that are what ethics-based policing, community policing, fair policing practices, all these things. And it's literally just it's a political move. And they're saying we're trying to get something out of it, but the community won't help us. We want to solve these murders, but the community won't talk to us. Well, the community also saw you beat dude down last week, and I don't feel like you can't keep these safe. These folks are coming here killing somebody on a weekly basis. You haven't made any arrests. I feel unsafe. I just want to go to the store. Like, I'm a worker dude. I'm UPS for 4 hours, that's all I can get, but I need to go to the store and get milk for my baby. But the last time somebody got killed was at that store last night, but I still need milk. So when I walk to the store, I don't have a pistol. And instead of the police trying to go and see where folks are that's coming into this community, in their mind, we're going to keep this community safe by keeping everybody off the streets. We're going to harass everybody walking down the street. And this man has in jail. He's a felon. And you're a gang member because of where you live with the gun. And I don't know none of the dudes around here like that. But it's just my safety, and this is where I can afford to live. So why am I trusting a system that is doing this to me? And so that's going to be a long process. But as a community, we can do something for ourselves. If we're waiting for the police to help us, we've already failed. I just hope if we're going to wait for them to fix this problem for us, we've given up already. We have to fix this problem ourselves, and then we have to drag them to where we need them to be and make them do what the community needs them to do to be safe. I'm not trying to say that everybody isn't under the same law. I get that. But you know what? There's 50 shades of gray. Everybody's always black and white, and there's so much gray in between, depending on where you're from, how you live, what perspective you have about life, what experiences you had in life, and you go from there. And so when you just, this is what it is, this is what it is. In all honesty, in some of these communities, we don't have the opportunities that other communities have. Yeah, I know what I shouldn't steal. I get that. I should not steal. If my stomach is growling, and this is the only option I have to get something to eat, I'm gonna steal. Then I'm gonna get caught sooner or later, and I'm gonna have to deal with those consequences. So until we start looking at these communities, like they are victimized. Like we finally got to a place where now you see a prostitute, she's 16 years old, you're like, something's wrong here. And it's not criminalized. We're gonna go help you get the help because somehow or another you are victim to a process that you never received any kind of help to support that. These young men and these young women in these communities are victims. They were born victims. Folks born in Palestine right now are victims, not by any volition of their own. It's just, this is who my mother and father is. This is where I came. And now I'm walking to school and I can literally just have a mom fall on me. And I've done nothing. And then the one who's gotten through that 20 years later and feel like they have absolutely no recourse, and then they strap a bomb on their chest and they walk to the joint and they blow up some folk in the grocery store. Like, that's insane when you look at it, like, what's going on over here? But imagine your life 20 years living in that type of environment, not getting all the healthy information that you had, not having the relationships that you had, not having the education that you had, not having a mother and father that was there for you your entire life. And how would you respond? Can you say that that's absolutely, you would never, ever do that? I really don't think we can. And so when we see how these young people are acting, I mean, yeah, it's horrific. But what alternatives have we actually provided for them? And so this is our argument. This is why the office exists. And we get a lot of flack for that. Because what we do is we identify folks that we believe is going to be most likely. That's how we say we need a relationship with you. Because you are the perpetual violence that occurs in these communities. You are one of the most active people in that process. We have thousands of young men, literally, thousands of young men every day carrying a pistol in this community. Just bottom line, that's what it is in this community. But in all honesty, all of them are carrying it because there's about 40 to 50 who's just actively looking to hurt someone. And the other 35, 3,950, and 4,950 are actually just trying to protect themselves. But as it goes along, so many folks get caught with guns, so many felons, and I can't go back to this school because somebody tried to shoot at me. I'm going to school. Somebody tried to shoot at me, and now I can't go to school anymore because we're about the safety of the other kids. I get it. So we've got to a place to where anything that doesn't fit in our boxes, whatever structure that box is, you push it to the side. We push it to the side. We push it to the side. Yeah, we got 95% graduation rate. Yeah, but you separated 3,000 students in that 4-year period. You ain't even adding them to your numbers. And so let's just be honest about what's going on in these communities. Let's be honest about how these young people are being affected. And let's also understand that we are responsible for this. Every single person in this country is responsible. Whether you didn't vote, you voted for something that somebody told you to vote on that you didn't know, and they're afraid. And I get it. So it's about information. That's what we teach these young folk. Teach them the truth. We need to inform the country on what's really taking place. Because all it takes is one quick little, 30-second video of Arnold Schwarzenegger walking past 4 people who would never ever get out of prison no matter what law you change, unless you just say, rape and murder and kidnapping is legal. So you're out of here. But scared of the devil, Charles Manson, Richard Ramirez, Richard Allen Davis, and you don't want to repeal the 3 strikes law, you want these people out. And it went from 68% to 42 in a matter of a week after one commercial being aired like 4 times. And it was absolutely all lies. Everything that was in that commercial was just lies. So politics are playing a very big role in what's going on. But we have individuals who are completely morally bankrupt deciding what is going on for us. And because historically colored folks really don't vote, another thing, you got a felony, you can't vote ever again. Another way, we talk about slavery is not in, but in the Constitution right now it says slavery is abolished unless someone commits a felony. Then while you're in prison, you can be treated just like a slave. Criminal justice is an oxymoron in this country. It does not exist. It just doesn't. So we have to bring justice to ourselves. We have to provide some type of justice within these communities, ourselves, and hopefully other folks will follow. It's just the way it has to be.
Really powerful statement. When you said that earlier that when you talk to young men and you give them hope, what's persuasive? I mean, what services are on offer that are useful to them? And because I can imagine, well, I can't imagine being in that situation, but when I try, I think, hope, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
So first of all, the best form of hope that we can give them is a positive relationship. And a relationship that a real relationship is supposed to be. There's nothing that you can do to make me not love you. Right? That's the bottom line. That's how they have to feel. That's what we have to promote to them. We deal with young people. We try to get them all kind of resources, all kind of referral processes. And we learn that the exact reason these young men need help makes them ineligible in these organizations. Because they got a quick turnaround. Their grant is for a year. We got to see 600 people in this amount of time. We got to have these kind of statistics, 65% success rate, whatever it may take. And so these young men don't fit into any of those boxes. I've been dealing with young men 4, 5, 6 years, and some of them still haven't gotten to a place where we can say they're going to be successful. but they're not killing people anymore. And so that's our success rate. But because we've gotten to a place where we actually have a real relationship with them, that's just not okay for us to say, okay, he's good, and then we move on. Yeah, he ain't, but he's still getting high every day, playing video games and swiping cards and selling drugs, and that's still no future for him. So we continue to work with him. But there's no deadline. Like, you gotta have it by here, and we gotta keep on pushing. Because if we don't engage, once again, you're angry, you already showed that you don't have a problem with being violent. And so what's your recourse? So we just continue. So the biggest thing we give them is a healthy relationship. It never goes away. I mean, a young man don't talk to me 3-4 months, and then when he talks to me, it's like, nah, oh man, you ain't talk to me, you don't care about me, that's not the game that we play. Man, so glad you're back. It's a prodigal son. And everything we had for you, we still got for you. And we want you to go through this process with us. And you're gonna be better. Another way that we provide hope is that we have some great success stories where they can see. What they need to know is they have an opportunity to be whatever it is they want to be. Most of these young men don't believe that they can do anything except what they're doing right now. Because nothing's ever been promoted to them except what they're doing right now. The first one they got their dad gave, or their uncle gave. The first sack they got their older brother gave. This is the way people show love in these communities. As full disclosure, that was a great commercial for the office. Also, as I said, we have public backgrounds in the office. I spent 10 years in prison for attempted murder. And when I came home, I had folks that I had great relationships with who loved me before I went. And they wanted to see me okay. They didn't want to see me hurt. After 10 years, you got to get back on your feet. And I had folks literally come and bring me big bags of drugs. It was like, bro, get on your feet. And that was literally them showing me that they loved me and had no idea that love and the way they were showing it could possibly destroy me. Like, they weren't considering that. And so we showed them real love. Like, they think they got real love in the community because they got somebody who's willing to go out and do horrific acts. If you get shot, you in the hospital, when I come visit you, don't worry, bro, I got back home. That's me showing you love. Not me trying to keep you safe. What can we do to make sure this never happens to you again? You need to get somewhere because this is the second time that you've been shot in 6 months. I mean, we're trying to get the concept of true love back into these communities. That's what we're trying to do. So as much addiction is that we're trying to get them addicted to hope. We're trying to get them addicted to life. We're trying to get them addicted to love. And a lot of the ways you do it is you got to show them something they've never seen before. Another way we do that is we travel. We take these young men all over the world. We've been all over this country. We've been in South Africa. We've been in Mexico City. We're in London and Paris in July. I mean, we try to get these folks to understand there's so much more out there. I went to Costa Rica on my own for a bachelor party. And on my flight back, there was like 17 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds on the plane. And I'm like, wow. And it's a school in San Francisco. It's like, oh yeah, we do this every year. They don't do that in Richmond Unified School District. Yeah, they do that in Lafayette. They do that in Danville. They do that in San Francisco. Why? Because they understand that a young person needs to see the world to even be able to dream about what their possibilities are. And we're not showing them anything but right here. And then we're making it even worse. Like, you don't even got the whole Richmond. You just got North. Because if you go over there, you're unsafe. And these folks just got Central. Because if they over here, they're unsafe. You know, folks on the south side at least get to see some water. And so literally, it's like we have folks who live in this community who hasn't seen the coastline of their community. They are in boxes. And what we have done is we have nailed those boxes shut in the goodness of the community. Like, let that be over there. You got 30, 40,000 people who live in the city of Richmond that love this community. It's fantastic. The weather's great. My neighbors are polite. But they drive right past all of that other stuff. They get on 580 and they just go right to Oakland or San Francisco to where they work. And they come right on back to Point Richmond. Great little pub down there at the end. Folks out there till 1 o'clock at night. Ain't nobody getting robbed on the way home. So they don't see the Richmond that everybody else lives in. And so they don't care about the Richmond that everybody else lives in. And so we have to we're saying that they're in a box. Yet we're not looking at the box that we've placed ourselves in. And we're not willing to open ourselves up to help folks that's right across the street. Right across the street. And yet I'm willing to put $20 million annually in this, there's no build wells in Africa. And that's the folks in Honduras who need shoes. And I'm part of the church, and we're sending cans go down to Mexico. We're going down to Mexico for a week during Easter to build homes for folk. And there's folk right down the street from you. We have come to a place in this society. How do you get in a limousine and drive 5 miles to your $30 million jet in a hangar? You've passed up 25 homeless people. And it doesn't even, I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. That's why our country is the way it is. Our country is about me. Our country is about what benefits me. Our country is about what benefits those I love. And when I say those I love, that's a small circle, because not the 9,000 employees I have. If I really loved them, I wouldn't have wrecked their retirement plan. It's about me. And we're teaching that to our children. These young men don't care about life because they know the community doesn't care about them. They see it every day. They see a police officer that can barely talk, like you got the worst. You can't barely speak proper English. You got a GED, you got a little bit of military training, but you ain't never went to prison. So now you can get a job, making $140,000 starting off, and you probably don't even do your budget right because you can't count. But a teacher who goes for master's degrees and doctorate degrees, yeah, she's worth $45,000, $50,000 a year because of who she's teaching. Yeah, they see their value every single day. And we're mad about them because they're acting a certain way. These folk have been making grown-up decisions since they were 9, 10, 11 years old. Young man ate the other side of the fire. I was 5 years old when I got shot playing outside and straight bullet hit me in my chest and almost died. Yeah, I hate them. What are we doing about it? You gotta bridge gaps. You gotta build relationships. We take these young folk with the folk that they hate the most and go somewhere. Kind of hard to be mad at you, first of all. I'm scared of flying, so 40,000 feet up. All the games to get out of here if it's your first flight. I'm also not afraid because I know you went through TSA just like I went through TSA, so ain't no guns, ain't nothing going on. And it's tense, but we always make sure that there's cities somewhere right next to each other for that 6 hours to DC. And you can't just sit there quiet for that long. So you start talking. And then by day 4, day 5, these dudes ain't leaving out of the hotel, seeing a lot. What you doing? Well, I'm waiting on nothing. We're gonna go get something to eat. And yeah, they build relationships because they never even knew the dude. All they knew, he was one of them suckers. He one of them suckers from over there. He one of them dudes. And so allow them to see each other because they're the same person. They like the same things, like the same music, they dress the same, their hair's the same, gold teeth made by the same dude. They got so much in common, and we just allow them to see their commonalities. And once they start seeing their commonalities, it's hard for me to do something to you when I recognize you as a human being. One young man said it the best, it's like the humanity in you won't lie. But the humanity was in you all the time. You just never tapped into it. And so that's how we get going.
Thank you. We have guests that have come on who we have not heard from. We want to start on Sam's other side. Please tell us your name, who you are, and your take on the issues. You've been here since the beginning, so you know what you're doing. All right.
Sure. My name is Eduardo Martinez. I'm a newly elected Richmond City Council member. And I've worked with Tanisha, Andrés, and Marilyn on various projects to move our city forward. And I highly support the ONS and admire the work that they do. And hope we can expand so that it doesn't any longer need to be expanded, because the work that they do will solve the problem. I want to start off by saying that drug criminalization reinforces racism. And the way it does that is that it creates a system in which more and more people of color end up in prison, so that people who aren't in it look at the statistics and say, more African Americans are in prison, so that means that they have this criminal gene inside of them. And if you accept the myth that we have criminal justice, that we have a system that's just, then there's no other fact that you can assume. I mean, you know, the statistics show that these guys are criminals. And so I've had people make that argument to me. And when I try to explain to them why there are more African Americans, more Latinos in prison than white people, they're not in it, so they don't know. And they want to believe that white people are more pure. So there's also the aspect of learned behavior. I'm a retired school teacher, and I used to have students who had anger management problems. And there was this one kid who got so angry that he was kicking over tables and things. And so you know, I built a relationship with him, and I would joke with him. And after a while, he knew that I was onto him, and I helped him realize that his behavior was a pattern that he had learned. He had no other models of behavior. He still had the anger, but no models for dealing with it. And he realized, you know, I'm doing this because I don't know what else to do. And as a child, I had that same experience. I remember ruining a surprise party for me because there was something inside of me that made me act out. I had no idea what it was, but it was just this behavior that I knew was wrong when I was doing it, but I couldn't stop myself. And if I had had someone to lead me through it, I could have come out so that everyone won. So this is something that happens to people who are in a culture where there is no help, where everyone is hustling for a bite to eat, where everyone has to do their best, and their best isn't good enough because the system says you're not good enough, you're a criminal, you just got out of jail, you know, how can I trust you? So these are things that we have to work on. And with the police issue, Yvonne said it very well. And as an official, a public official, I've noticed that when I go places dressed in my suit like I am now, people react to me differently. You know, I don't get that same amount of trust that I have when I go in the neighborhoods in my t-shirt and jeans. And that's because in my suit, I portray this image of someone who belongs to the establishment, who has been putting their thumb on them in any way possible. So when a policeman comes in their uniform, they get the same reaction because it's that uniform that threw them in jail. It's that uniform that threatened them. It's that uniform that said, what are you doing walking down the street? And I've had that experience myself. I've been in neighborhoods when I'm wearing my t-shirt and jeans, and I've had police stop me and ask me, what are you doing in this neighborhood? As if I have to have a reason for walking down the street. And we shouldn't have to experience that. I know that if I were white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, I probably wouldn't have been stopped the way that I was in this neighborhood. And so creating gated communities to separate themselves from the rest of the world. And it's this separation from each other that's creating this problem. Instead of fixing the problem, you just want to separate yourself from it. And we need to stop that. And community you know, that's one thing I love about Safe Return. Safe Return is building community, not only with the returnees, but connecting the returnees with the rest of the community. When we do the ceasefire walks, it's connecting the community with the people who need to be shown that they are loved, shown that they are cared for. So we live in a society where drugs are pushed. If you turn on your television during news time, you will see drug ad after drug ad after drug ad. And these are drugs that, if you're part of the system, are easy for you to get. You know, you just call your doctor and say, I need this, and the doctor gives it to you. But if you're not part of the system, you don't have a doctor to call because you can't afford one. So you know, you're still suffering from the same things. A lot of the drugs are for panic attacks, for depression, the very things that a community that's dysfunctional causes you to have. But you have no way to medicate yourself the way you would if you were had access to a doctor to get these for you. So we have these learned behaviors where, you know, people give you drugs because, you know, they want to love you, and they think that giving you drugs will help you because they need the drugs in order to cope with the situation that they're in. So I think love is a drug that will help us all. Community is a drug that we need to reach for when we need help. And these organizations that we have in Richmond are doing that for the communities that need them.
Thank you. Our second guest, I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak to us. Please tell us who you are, your organization, and share with us the talk.
My name is Micah Marshall. I'm the Youth Justice Coordinator at the Rise Center. The Rise Center is a nonprofit organization that provides wraparound services to young folks that are ages 13 to 21 here in West Contra County. I'm primarily working with young folks that are either juvenile justice system involved or at-risk system involvement. And I think it's important that we are discussing the issues of the war on drugs has on young people, because we see the impact on a daily basis. We see young people that can't go to school unless they're high because they're trying to deal with the trauma and cope with the trauma that they're dealing with at home. And I think it's really important that we're having these conversations and bringing together community members that are really battling the issue at hand, because a lot of our young folks that come into the door are seeing the impact of drug policy war in their home. They're missing their families, they're missing their parents, they're missing their father and their mother due to the issues and the systematic problems that are happening that remove them from the household, be it the Welfare Act that doesn't allow your dad to live in the home with you because he has a felony record from 10 years ago. Or it doesn't allow you and your family to have sustainable housing because you guys just can't afford it. So your dad's out selling drugs, but he gets caught up, and so now your housing is at risk because you can't pay your rent. And I think what a lot of young people deal with at Rise is trying to figure out, how do we survive? How do we make it through the day, be it trying to find financial support by going out and selling weed or going out and selling whatever they can put their hands on to sell, to make sure that they're helping their moms. They don't want to see their parents struggle. They don't want to see a single parent household struggling even more because their dad's not in the picture, because their mom's not in the picture. We do a campaign called the Listening Campaign, where we deal with young folks that have tremendous exposure to trauma and tremendous exposure to violence, and trying to understand how they deal with those issues, and how us as service providers can better support them in those day-to-day issues that they experience. And I think out of the 1,000 young people that we surveyed throughout West Contra County, only 1% of those young people can identify that they go and get mental health support services, that they go and talk to someone about the issues that they're dealing with. So the rest of those 99% are either running away from their issues, which puts them at risk of being out in the community and not having someone that's there to support them and make sure that they're safe. But it also leaves the remainder of those young people trying to find their own ways to cope, be it drugs or alcohol. About 60% of the young folks that we worked with in those focus groups identified that they either smoke weed or drink alcohol and get through the day. There's young folks that identified that they can't even get on the bus to go to school without going to smoke a blunt. And so I think it's important to realize that the drug policy war impacts our community, but it also impacts the young person as an individual. They can't see a brighter day and see a better future if they can't even get out of bed without being numb to all the pain and all the trauma that they've gone through in the past 10 to 12 years. It's also important that we realize how drug policy also creates this generational problem where young folks just see drugs in their household, they see it as normalized, they see it as something that's common, and it's learned behavior. It's something that they don't really know how to combat, and they don't really know anything different, so they just fall into line, they fall into what their big brothers used to do, they fall into what their cousins are doing. And I think Sam made a great point by saying, this is how love shows up in our community. Love shows up with, oh, let's go match a blunt. Oh, love shows up with, let's go piece up on a Hennessy bottle. And I think it's important that we combat and tear down those stereotypes and show young people a new normal, and show them that it's okay to go to school sober and deal with the issues that they have to deal with, but also know that they have community partners and community organizations that they can come and deal with those issues. And I think RISE and all of the community partners on this board provide that space for young people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So with our time remaining, which is about 15 minutes, we've spoken about what doesn't work. And also, we've heard from you about some things that you are doing that are working. And let's talk about that a little bit more. What would be better than the way drug policy is currently happening in our country? What would be better than the way that formerly incarcerated people, what they face when they come out of prison? What would be better on the streets and build those relationships in the community than the ways that we are normally attempting to deal with the issues of drug use and incarceration and reentry? And Tamisha, I want to start with you because when we were talking before, you said some very important things about Prop 47 that I think both need to hear. So why don't we start with you, and then anyone else who wants to respond to that, just raise your hand and we'll ask one.
So I counted, so that's 2 minutes each. I will keep track of my organizing. I think, first of all, I'm really grateful for having an opportunity to participate in the Safe Schools, Safe Neighborhoods Act, which is now being really promoted as Prop 47. Which turns wobblers, which are crimes that could be a felony or a misdemeanor, now just into misdemeanors because of the disproportionate impact of felony cases on communities of color. And so what this initiative is supposed to do is save a lot of money that could also be redirected to victim compensation, education, and mental health and drug abuse services. About 60% of the funding will go to mental health and drug abuse services. Young people do need, but also people in the community who have suffered a lot of trauma that led them to incarceration in the first place, or to use drugs. The thing that I find very significant when you pass legislation is the devil is in the details. And so a lot of people don't really ever talk about what that means. And so what that means for us as people who are on the ground and in the community, informing processes and engaging with individuals, is that you only have a 3-year window for Prop 47 for the retroactive phase, which means that individuals who are not currently in county jail going through pretrial sentencing, who are already identified or in prison, which will go through reclassification. These are people who are in the community walking around who have these lower level offenses that need to petition the courts to have the felony conviction transformed into a misdemeanor, only have 3 years to engage all of those individuals across California, because when the 3-year window shuts, everybody who has not went through the process will no longer qualify, and only new cases will. So that's a lot of people. And so what I have been saying is that it should really be our ultimate responsibility as individuals who hold a wealth of information like this, is to really go around and share with our communities and be really clear about the urgency around identifying any felony conviction that you might have that could have been considered a wobbler, to go and petition to get this transformed into a misdemeanor, but not only to get the felony reduced into a misdemeanor, but to also go through court to clean your record through the clean slate process, because we also know that because criminalization of communities of color is so high, that a lot of people now, because a lot of people are fighting against the box, the felony box, you are seeing a lot more people even asking if you've been convicted of a misdemeanor, which is ridiculous, right? So you could kind of see that when policy has changed, the discrimination in communities only transform. It's like a virus. You can't really kill a virus because it learns how to adapt to the drugs that you're giving it, and that's kind of what happens. So when you start attacking felonies, now you get people who are determined to discriminate now asking, have you been convicted of a misdemeanor, right? So I think because of the 3-year window that we really should do a lot more work on the ground to get more people through the process no matter what. The funding, however, through Prop 47 will not have Board of State and Community Corrections and the Board of Education until 2016. But I think that it's also a responsibility of ours, again, to know that there will be local savings that we are already seeing at the city and county level as a result of Prop 47. So here in Contra Costa County, we have already reduced our county jail. So we had about 2,500 people. Since November, a little over 1,000 people have been released already. So that's a significant amount of savings, especially if each bed is like 45 beds, but also for each individual for a day is 250, 45,000 a year, but a day. So like you can see daily savings, yearly savings. The fact that our police department doesn't really have to arrest also saves us money in time at the city level. So really to start identifying local level type of savings that we can start putting back into the community to be able to support city offices like the Office of Neighborhood Safety and others to begin to really do real relational work with individuals to be able to help, because just because you change a policy does not mean you change behavior. Just because you change a policy does not mean you change thinking, and just because you change a policy does not mean that you change structural racism in our country or even in our communities. So even though Joe can't get a felony anymore for having a bag of weed or being caught with a bag of weed, we really should be helping build a relationship with him to let him know that this is not permission to continue to defeat yourself just because you can't get a felony for this bag of weed. So now we need to start letting people know that this is a new opportunity, that this could be really an opportunity for you to change your life around. I have a leader who's been homeless for many years because of a felony. We were on the phone 2 weeks ago, and I told him, because he is an addict, I said, do you know that every crime you've ever committed in your 60 years of living, because he can't even qualify for senior housing because of this felony? Do you know that every crime you pretty much committed in your 60 years of living was a Prop 47 crime, and now you can go to court and get that all cleared away and not be homeless anymore? And what does that mean to you, to not be homeless anymore? And start to get people to start visualizing what their own prosperity looks like as a result of drug policy change.
I'm going to start at the macro and move to the micro. Is that, the American Empire is a legacy of colonialism and structures of colonialism that are maintained that, keep us divided and keep us oppressed. Then bringing it back down, travel and seeing how other people live is critical to understanding other possibilities. And I've had the good fortune of being able to travel. And so I've been to places like Holland. And so, first step, we need to legalize so-called soft drugs like marijuana, treat it like alcohol. Over there, they don't criminalize addiction. They treat addiction because they have universal state-provided health care. It's a socialist system. They have universal housing, universal education. All these things that make a healthy human being. And when people fall off, they treat them, they help them, and as opposed to punish them. And so we need to move in that direction. We need to modify capitalism, move more into socialism, and in the end, it also involves guns. Guns were part of the colonial legacy. The Second Amendment was about federalism, about the slave states wanting to have the right to arm their militias to keep the slave revolts in check. It was never about individual right. Unfortunately, the screwed up Supreme Court we have now completely turned that around and articulated it as an individual right. And all that does is allow militarization of our civil community. And we didn't used to always have guns in this society. It was only really in the beginning of the late 70s and the 80s with the advent of militarization of arms manufacturers into semi-automatic weapons that spread throughout our society that then created the reaction of mass incarceration. And we need to, like in many other countries, most other so-called modern industrial societies, gun possession is highly restricted and highly controlled. And over here, the proliferation of guns as an industry has led to this violence, and the culture that we have as a product of colonialism, of the rugged individuals standing up against those who would come after them, whether it was a cowboy or a gangster. It is part of the cultural problem we have in this country that we need to change and embrace more taking care of each other rather than some individual taking care of business himself.
I'll just say thank you. This has been an amazing panel. Panels are all fantastic. Amen to everything you've said. I just want to, in terms of solutions, we need to address the root of the addictions. People need love, as Eduardo said. They're traumatized. They need treatment and caring and healing, deep, deep healing from that trauma. With the work that Sam and Tamisha at the Rice Center does, that needs to be amplified many, many times over. So I'd say that the decriminalization of drugs, yes, of course, but that's the tip of the iceberg. Much more than that, we need to address the deep healing that's needed, and we need to put massive resources into that. And we can do it. The resources are there. As Andrés mentioned earlier, follow the money. The whole drug trade doesn't stop with the drug kingpins getting rich. It goes straight to Wall Street and to the whole financial institutions. Why is it that we accept the fact that it's okay for a few people to be multi-billionaires while so many in our neighborhoods are struggling just to have a place to sleep and something to eat and get a little respect during the day? So we need to shift our whole money system. Let's have a ban billionaires campaign, nationwide and worldwide, and let's commit to putting all our resources into making sure that there is a minimum standard of living that everybody enjoys, but let's have a maximum too, so that everybody falls in between and everybody can have a good life. We can do it. We have the know-how to do it, but the question is, do we collectively have the will to do it?
I would just add, drugs aren't the problem. Guns aren't the problem. They're not. If you go into the corner store in North Richmond and there's a wall full of oxymoles, those matzo balls are just gonna sit there for years and get dust, because nobody in North Richmond eats matzo balls. If they didn't need drugs, drugs wouldn't be an issue. If they didn't feel like they needed guns, guns wouldn't be an issue. Let's stop trying to deal with the symptoms, and let's deal with the sickness. There's pain, there's turmoil, there's low self-esteem. There's individuals definitely feeling less than. And they're hurting. Why do I need to smoke a joint before I go to school? If I didn't need it, the weed man could be right there on the corner. I'm walking right past it. I have no need for that. The dude who's selling guns can be right there. I'm walking right past it. I don't need a gun for safety. My community makes me feel safe. Let's deal with the issue. He got cancer. Let's not give him cough syrup because he got a cough. The man got lung cancer. Let's give him chemo. Let's give him radiation. Love, hope, passion, equal hand in things. I'm not saying that billionaires shouldn't be billionaires. If I was a billionaire, I wouldn't want to not be a billionaire. But I definitely wouldn't have. Just at a click of the television, just local news. Do something. And that's an individual, right? So how can this billionaire be so selfish? How are we dealing with that? What is it in you that makes you feel like you are better than anyone else in this world? So I just end with this. I love saying it all the time. I make it very, very clear. But Gandhi's first trip to America, I believe he went to New York. And of course it was Gandhi. It was after all the great strides he had made in India. And he was a diplomat in America's eyes. He was a normal man in his own. He was a man who made his own clothes. All these things. So jet, first class, red carpet, limousine, all of those things that he doesn't want anything to do with. That's us trying to impress him. And so at the end of the day, the diplomat was taking him to the Waldorf Astoria, I'm sure, getting out, taking him to the room, and asked him, so what do you think of American civilization? And Gandhi's response was, it would be nice. Yeah, why don't we put some civilization back in America? Why don't we put some humanity back in America? And all these symptoms that we're dealing with will go away because we're making the heart and the lungs and the mind healthy and good.
So the problem is the system. I've worked with organizations that work with the homeless. Saffron Strand works with homeless people that, when you're down, you learn to not trust people because everyone that you encounter doesn't trust you, and they don't trust you because you don't have a job, you don't have a home, and when you're down, and people won't hire you, you have no other way to act, you have no other way to behave other than to beg, other than to ask or to steal. So they found that people who are homeless develop patterns of behavior that make it difficult for them to keep a job after they get a job. So they need the support to once they get the job, to keep the job. So we need to build structures of support that not only help us over the hump, but help us stay over the hump. We also have the problem of marijuana being criminalized, and so because of that, we have a market where we have a drug that's unregulated, meaning that if you go to the street and you buy something, you have no idea what you're buying. You could get junk, and you could get things that's not good for you. So any drug that we have needs to be legalized and it needs to be regulated so that we have healthy options. And I know that we have we're developing a drug system in which we can develop different strains of drugs to help particular problems. So the problem with criminalizing marijuana is that we've created a underground market, and when you have an underground market, you have an underground society that is criminalized along with the marijuana. So if you don't want to have these underground societies, we need to lift them up and put them out in the light so that we don't have to have people going to people on the street corner to buy what they need. If it's out in the open, we can determine whether or not they need it. You know, we can see which people need help and which people have it under control and can deal with it, and which people actually need the drug for whatever ailment they might have. I mean, we have controlled Prozac, we have controlled Vicodin, we have controlled Ritalin that we force on our kids because we deem those kids not able to work in a controlled environment. So you know, there are good uses of drugs, and then there's an abuse of drugs. And as long as we keep it underground, there is no way for us to determine exactly the scope of it and how much of it is being abused.
Councilman Martinez, I'd actually like to follow up with you a little bit about the point that you just made about Ritalin. I'm Deborah Small, one of the task force members. Because we are comfortable in talking about marijuana and decriminalization of marijuana, but not so much cocaine and methamphetamines and opiates, which are other major drugs of abuse. And I was really happy to hear Andrés talk about the increase in opiate production and what that means in terms of its availability here on the streets. And so my question is to you, one, do you see any relationship between the level of the medication of young people in schools with drugs like Ritalin, which are psychoactively very similar in properties to cocaine, and what impact that has when they reach an age where they're no longer able to get that drug that's being prescribed, but they have been habituated to it for a long period of time. And if you see that providing some space for us to talk about these other drugs that we're not talking about today, you know, to talk about cocaine and opiates and methamphetamines.
Yeah, well, I think we have a medical system that actually pushes drugs. You know, there are doctors who get money, you know, for drugs that they prescribe. We know that's a fact. As I said, I've been a school teacher, and I've had students, you know, on Ritalin, and I've had students that were said to need Ritalin, and actually there was no difference between those students. And I found that actually drinking coffee, was as good as taking Ritalin, you know, because of the caffeine. So I think we need to examine the issue of the AMA and how our medical system is actually working with the pharmaceutical system to make money. At the conference that I met you at, I know that one of the issues was by legalizing marijuana, we might be making marijuana part of the pharmaceutical mafia, for lack of a better word, and so I do know that there are people, and there are good doctors, you know, who actually are trying to do the best to serve their community. And then there's doctors who want another car and they want a yacht, and so they find ways to get that. So It's, for me, when it comes right down to it, it's capitalism and the system that we have, which makes people's worth equal to the amount of money that they make. And it's that system that equates worth with money that we need to create a system where service is the highest of value. You know, it's a service that you perform, that you give to the community, that makes you valuable.
So we have one more statement from our panelists before
I think I'm just gonna echo a lot of what I've heard just recently. I think it's important to really identify the issue at hand, the cause of whatever the root cause is. I think it's important to realize that young people are dealing with issues and dealing with problems and trauma that they don't know how to cope, they don't know how to deal, they don't know how to find a new normal, and they don't know how to find other significant ways of dealing with the issues that they're dealing with because they're born into them. The things that they had no choice, no option, or no regulation of what's happening to them. I think what's also important is showing them the opportunities that are available. I think RISE takes really trauma-informed response when we deal with young people that have either drug issues or dependent on drug issues or are selling drugs. We take a real trauma-informed response. We don't turn young people away because they come to the center high or they come to the center under the influence. We try to deal with the issue, we try to understand it, we try to get some kind of recognition of what their issue is and what their needs are, and then try our best to provide supportive services to be able to identify that issue. We solely try to identify the young person where they're at. We meet them where they're at. We don't want to set them up for failure and make them do something that we know they can't accomplish. We want to be there where they come to us and provide a stable course for them to be able to move forward and be able to be successful in whatever that means. If that means we ask them not to smoke weed every day, try to just come in one day out of the week not high, and let's see how you maintain in the space. Let's see what happens. I think it's important that we show them a new course of option, show them the opportunities that are out there, because if they don't see it, they'll never recognize it, and they'll never internalize it as something that's tangible for them. And I think it's also important just to be consistent for young people. It's hard for them to realize that people are actually there for them. So if you're there on Monday, you need to be there on Tuesday. If you're going to be there on Tuesday, you got to be there on Wednesday. They want to see that even if they don't always come through, that you come through. Because they're used to folks failing them, and they're used to folks not always being consistent and not always being viable. But I think it's important that we are making this commitment to not only just young people, but to people that are dealing with these issues. And if we're going to say that we're going to be there for them, we have to be there all the time. And not just when it's appropriate or when it's convenient for us to work that we do.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the task force or any of our panelists? Yes.
I have a question. Richmond, the city of Richmond has been out front of the city on some issues, thinking about the right of domain, the right of domain issue, and working against Chevron. Several of you have said that you would decriminalize or legalize marijuana. What are the prospects for the city of Richmond to take some action against prohibition? It could be specific to marijuana, it could be decriminalization or legalization, and redirect the resources that are currently used for enforcement in the city to support the different programs that you all have articulated in your work. Is there a prospect of it?
Well, I think providers and advocates were just meeting this week for the prospect of a statewide ballot proposition to legalize marijuana in 2016. statewide ballot. That's where it has to be done because it's a state law that prohibits it. And so obviously the city council can pick a position by adopting a resolution to do that. At the same time, we've seen police departments make enforcement of personal usage amounts the minimal enforcement priority. And so those are some local steps that can be taken. And just trying to keep informed and stay ahead of the curve. So it's really going to take statewide action. We know it's not going to happen in the legislature. We have an initiative process. It's going to be a vote of the people. And as older generations die off with their ideas and attitudes, and younger people who have more enlightened attitudes enter into the voting base, that's what's going to happen.
I'll just add one other thing that's happening in the city of Richmond is we do have a very robust program for permitting and regulating medical marijuana dispensaries, since that has been voted legal in California, and that helps some for the large number of people who do use marijuana for medical purposes. In consultation with a doctor, they no longer have to go out on the street to get that. We do have a handful of very well regulated that sector.
And the funny thing about that is that we have dispensaries and pharmacies, and when those pharmacies are checked on, they're checked on by building inspectors because marijuana has been criminalized, even though we have dispensaries, we don't have people who are familiar with marijuana as a drug. We have the police go to the pharmacies to inspect the pharmacies. And instead of policemen inspecting the pharmacies, because policemen have been interacting with drugs as a crime, we need to have medical people inspecting the pharmacies as a medical facility. So I think that's one way that the city council, the city council could make an ordinance that would change the inspection of the marijuana medical facilities, so that it takes us further away from marijuana as a drug, as a crime, to marijuana as a medical drug, which is what the pharmacies provide.
Can I
I think I'd just like to answer that before you finish, and I'd like to question as well, because we were able to get immigration law passed in the city of Richmond, where folks who are undocumented can get IDs, can get driver's licenses, can do things that the state is saying, no, that's not going to happen. The feds haven't approved it, but the city has. We can push that line and say, in the city of Richmond, marijuana is no longer illegal. But I believe that they can push that, make sure that the chief of police doesn't use any resources. Now it's going to be a lot of pushback, and now whether that's a fight that is even worth fighting, in the political realm, I have no idea. But I can imagine there's going to be a lot of pushback, because one thing is, that's one of the best ways that they get these young men. You smell like weed, come over here. You know what I'm saying? I pull you over, I smell weed in the car, get out, and I found 2 pistols. And so if I lose my right, because the weed is no longer an issue, now what justification do I have? And so I think that the police department's going to push back 100%, because they want to be able to use that small thing. They want to be able to, they want to be able to do that. And so if they lose, it's just like the stop and frisk, like completely biased, completely racist. But the argument is, hey, 87% of the folks say we stop, we get something on it. How do you justify it?
So all of you have addressed the legalization of decriminalization part of it, but not the redirecting resources. So that's I'm wondering about that.
So I'm completely fine with like the legalization of marijuana as a result of criminalization. But not without a strategy to redirect services in a way to address some of the trauma of why people actually self-medicate with drugs like this in the first place, or being able to think of some type of policies where when marijuana is legalized, you have medical marijuana dispensaries, people can only go there if they have been prescribed by a doctor. What are the chances of a doctor prescribing a 14-year-old with a prescription for marijuana to be able to address pain and trauma that he or she has faced in a community? So like, it clearly, you can't just, it has to be really strategic in a way where resources are directed to counseling, mental health services, trauma-informed services, different types of restorative practices, because restorative justice is a very broad word, which I've come to learn that can mean many different things for many different people. And also, how will community be able to inform what happens with that funding versus it just going into the city's general fund and going back to law enforcement or going to salaries or somewhere else. The city of Richmond is not a youth-friendly city, so we don't have a youth-directed budget. We had 1,200 young people who needed summer employment last year and could only employ, I think about what, 250. So there you have 250 young people employed and the other young people just hanging out around the streets with nothing else to do for the summer. So if we did do that in the city of Richmond, just a more strategic way, but if we to be able to redirect funds to more of a youth-focused budget and also to address counseling and trauma, and if we did it as a state, it would really need to be strategic in a way where we're not actually setting people up for failure, but directing resources to continue to make people healthy.
Who oversees the redirection of funds?
Depends on the funds. Depends on the funds. Some is state funded, some is federal funding, some is local generated.
Yeah.
Board of State and Community Corrections, because any funding that is redirected from criminal activity or even through saving funds by not locking people up, that money has to be overseen by the Board of State and Community Corrections. They actually decide how the money is disseminated. They draft the RFPs and RFQs. They talk to everybody. This board is really law enforcement heavy. It's not really diverse in color. So when the funding does come as a result of Prop 47 and other initiatives to reduce the prison population or criminalization of drugs and other things, it usually doesn't come to the communities. In fact, where we promote healthy living and informed trauma, it usually just goes down to police departments in the form of like burn jack funding and things of that nature.
And at the local level, the dispensaries pay a lot of money for their license. And so that money actually goes to the police department to fund another policeman. So what we need to do is to direct that money not to another policeman, but to services that will help the communities get kids off of drugs. You know, it could go to community centers to provide programs. It could go to counseling. And I actually, we have someone who is here from, who runs a dispensary, medical dispensary, and maybe he can speak to the amount of money that the dispensaries have to pay and where that money goes, since he's directly connected to that realm.
We also have to break the stranglehold that police and fire have over municipal budget in California and their retirement packages. They get 3% times the number of years of service at their highest rate salary and are eligible for retirement at 50 years old. That's why all the cities are going bankrupt. So we need to break the stranglehold that the police and fire unions have on municipal budgets, which can be usually 60 to 70% of the city's budget. And that's one way a locality can redirect resources.
So I wanted to follow up on John's question earlier about city government. And I appreciated the response that you gave around marijuana. And yet I want to come back to the fact that that's not the main work that people go to prison for. And it's not the main focus of law enforcement in terms of the things that separate people from making their lives fulfilled. But I don't even want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the fact that in Europe, it was mayors and cities that actually put their governments on a different course around drug policy. So the reason that you have governments in Germany and Switzerland and Italy, etc., embracing harm reduction was because you had mayors in 7 cities that formed a group that was like the European Cities for Reform that actually said, regardless of what our national governments do, we are going to embrace a 7-point platform of harm reduction as being our policy in our cities. And because they were large cities, they had an influence on the country. And so I want to go back to the question that John asked, because I think, and I live in Richmond. I live in Richmond. And I'm proud of the fact that Richmond has been a leader in addressing issues around the mortgage foreclosure, taking on the influence of the banks, actually challenging nationally the way in which the financial institutions are determining city policy. And so I also do you want to take leadership around this issue of drug policy too, in part because of the way it's impacted the city and because that you have programs that work. So I want to actually ask, because we have city officials here, are you actually willing inside the U.S. Conference of Mayors and interacting with other municipal leaders to take this issue on as a priority and help leaders to take us nationally in a different place? Because that's what this task force is about. You know, we're about getting to a place where we can have drug policy reform based on justice and human rights and compassion and ethics. And, you know, the more municipal and elected officials that we can have as partners in that, the more likely that we'll see success. At least my grandchild's lifetime, not mine.
Amen, and I'm on board. I'm not, the mayor has various subcommittees. I'm not part of the subcommittee that goes to the mayor conferences, but I can push to make sure that this issue is talked about at those meetings.
I think that the community and other task forces like this need to think of a strategic way to move city government to be able to take this issue on, period. We are all leading in the community, but in different ways that inform this overall process of preventing dehumanization and criminalization of our communities. And it usually happens through policies like this. But it will take a large enough initiative and people in the community who are well informed and care enough about the restoration of our communities to be able to force city government to take this on. If you're a resident of Richmond, you know how the city council roll. If you don't come in there with at least half the community population on board to do something and push the city in a manner that will force them to even create a committee over this type of issue, that it's just not going to happen. Our city government doesn't move by the voices of a few, but it's moved by the voices of many. So if we could get enough Richmond residents on board and say that this needs to be a priority, it needs to be a priority for the city of Richmond, and this is why, then we will not even be, we won't even have a foot in the door.
I have a question to this panel wide for anyone who would like to answer. Are there particular ways that you can imagine or would like to see churches getting involved with some of these adjustments and policy recommendations? I mean, that's a big part of my, in my case as a pastor, as congregations or as denominations nationally, What ideas would you have for us as people who are leaders and members of the churches for getting involved in supporting some of this in ways that would be most helpful?
Tanisha had an immediate reaction, so we want to start with her.
I will be clear, I don't laugh because it's ridiculous, I laugh because it makes sense, but it needs to make sense to clergy and congregations as well. I think when you live in a community with clearly over, 150 churches? Clearly,
161 registered.
161. You live in a community with 161 registered churches, and yeah. So I usually say this all the time when people talk about clergy and congregations getting involved in movements to change systems around issues in our community and putting their faith in action to be able to move, to really do what we do consider the work of our Father's business, right? Is that when you live in a community that suffers much trauma and pain as Richmond, you have 160 churches and the Spirit of God is not, like, miracles aren't happening. That's a clear statement to me that the church is sick. Like, something needs to happen. Like, I don't know what it is, but the church really needs to go through some type of awakening or reform. I don't know what that would take for them to be able to get out from behind their four walls. If I can remember, I read the Bible, I don't even think Jesus had a home. And so most of his work was out in the open. And so I would challenge clergy here in the city of Richmond or clergy nationally to really start to think about where you came from, because just because you are now a clergy or a part of a congregation doesn't dismiss you from being a part of the community and the pain that is and the trauma that is suffered in the community. I think we try to push a lot of our clergy to lead in many ways where they are clarifying themselves as a part of the actual problem as well, and being able to figure out a way to minister to the pain, but also become well informed enough around policy and legislation to put the faith, take the faith out of the pulpit and put it in the public eye and say, we are not God's people if we are not actually doing God's work. And I just don't know, I don't know what to do. I think it's a challenge here in Richmond. Most of our clergy say that churches are small, people are not tithing every Sunday, and just all of the issues that clergy face where they say they can't really do the work that the clergy should be doing.
Yeah, I agree completely with Tanisha, and I just want to say, if even half of the clergy in Richmond were as progressive and as forward-thinking as Reverend Kamal Hassan, you know, we'd have that movement going. And so I really appreciate your leadership in hosting this event and opening up this conversation, because I agree fully. If we could get more of our clergy on board and hold similar conversations, we could really get it going, working with community organizations, with service providers, with departments within the city that are working constructively. We can really move it, and appreciate Councilmember Martinez's commitment to, you know, carry forward with this at the city council level. And I think he'll find more and more community support behind it.
And if nobody votes, church people vote, congregations vote, we highly vote, we vote over any of the constituencies, and we should be using that action right to continue to transform systems at the local level.
Right. As a teacher, I found that the wider the teacher's experience is, the more he can teach his kids, and the more strategies the teacher has to work with the kids. And likewise, I've gone to a lot of congregations, and I see that some of the ministers have a narrow view of what they should be telling their congregation. And if I came to them and told them to open up, they would look at me as a sinner. So they need one of their fellow men, someone that they can see as an equal, to talk to them. I would suggest that all of the congregations in Richmond have assemblies where they talk about cultural and social issues, so that their vision of the gospel can encompass the here and now.
And I actually changed my mind. It wasn't about to talk, but I have no disrespect whatsoever. Please. The church is irrelevant.
Or what?
It's irrelevant. And I hate to say that, but the church is absolutely irrelevant, at least in the city of Richmond. It doesn't. Why? Someone can get shot out in front of the church, literally. Bullet holes in the wall of the church, 9 o'clock that night. And the church won't even let that person have their funeral there. Young men get killed in this community, and the church will not even let them have their funerals in those churches. Because you know what? You're bringing danger onto us. It's unsafe. We don't like y'all coming in my church smelling like weed. And so the community has come to an understanding church is for healthy people. The church is a hospital. The pastor is supposed to be a doctor. And the folks in the congregation should be sick. You are trying to get them to help. What folks have done is they come and put on their big hats. They got that same little Holy Ghost dance they do every Sunday. And they feel like they're better than everybody else out on the streets. And the people that's out on the streets recognize that difference. I am not welcome there. And guess what? I don't even want to go there anyway. You got 2 young people that were shot inside of a church in Richmond in 2010 on Valentine's Day. 5 years ago to the day. It was a national story. National. And now both of these dudes arrived at the hospital the same day. I mean, one was raised in the back and one got hit in the ankle. The dude got hit in the ankle, he was on crutches for about 4 weeks, but other than that, they were right back. And it was a national outcry. Oh my God, how did these boys come into a church and shoot? Because the youngsters don't care nothing about the church, because the church don't come to their community and show love. You got churches that have, and I've witnessed this, you have churches that have prison ministries, but don't want no prisoners coming to their front door.
So I'm gonna force Micah to say something about young people in church, because I think it's significant and it needs to be addressed.
I've seen in my 23 years of life that young people don't go to church unless their parents force them. They don't go to church unless it's instilled in their values and instilled into their routine that every Sunday we're going to wake up and we're going to go to Bible study, we're going to go to church together. And I've noticed that as young people get to the point where they make their own decisions, they stray away from the church. I particularly have strayed away from the church just out of the same notion that Sam brought up, is that the church isn't for me because I live a particular lifestyle, I dress a certain way, I act a certain way, I might come to church feeling some type of way. And because of that connotation, I'm looked down upon, and young people are looked down upon because they don't fit in. Their pants are sagging, or their shirt is too big, or you didn't come dressed appropriately. Well, God told me to come as I am, and He will accept me regardless. And so I think that what is challenging for the community in Richmond is to accept young people where they are and accept them for the faults and the realities of what their life experiences have been, and take them as they are and help them to heal and to become better. And I think a lot of what stifles young people from going to church is that someone else that understands where they're at and says that God will repair you and God will be that person that unknowingly will listen and help you. And I think for young people, it's going to take time. It's going to take church people and church members and people of the congregation to let them know that they can come into a space and feel accepted, to feel that their space in there is meaningful. Because a lot of kids that do go to church because their parents make them just go through the motions. They're just sitting there, okay, we're going to pray, we're going to say this hymn, and then I can go home and watch Sunday football. And so I think it's important that we make church meaningful for young people. We make it understandable, we make it tangible, we make it something that they really understand, because unless they have a relationship with God themselves, going to church isn't going to help. Because you can have a relationship with God and never step foot in the church and be one of the most holiest people I know. And so I think it's important that we let young people know that you define your own relationship with God, and you define your own relationship with faith. And it doesn't necessarily have to be within four walls in front of the pastor with God and country watching you.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions for our panelists, I think we want to move to close now. There's a part of me that feels compelled to defend the church, but I'm going to ignore that part of me right now and let it burn because I think it needs to. But I will say this, I was a church kid from my earliest memories until I got to be the age of 18 and the age to make my own decisions. One of the first decisions I made was to never go to church again. And my mother respected that decision, although she was sorry for my poor soul. And I sat out of church for 10 years because I felt church was irrelevant. But eventually I did find my way back when I learned that church and the gospel and Jesus' light and social justice were the same. Well, those things were united. Right? And I found after much looking a church I could attend. But so there we have it. And so I want to thank all of our panelists, and I think we ought to really show some appreciation for each and every one of them. Thank you for your incredible testimony and to the light on Richmond that you just shared. Okay? Because the story of Richmond is pretty bad, but you all represent the hope for for this city and the commitments that you have shown in the work that you are doing and in the hope that you're generating among the least of these in this community. And we certainly salute and applaud you for what you're doing. And I want to invite those who will to join me in a closing prayer. Now, God, we turn to you, away from our accusers and the judgment of the skeptics who question if God can indeed change lives. We hear this pronouncement from the Lord. Hear ye, hear ye. To those who overcome, I will give you the right to eat from the tree of life. You will join me in the paradise of our God. Accept this work today, God, as worship, for it is only in your presence that we will experience your power to save and redeem. Let us receive the presence of our Almighty Redeemer on this day and in the days to come. Amen. Amen. So I think we're going to be moving into lunch, and those of you who can stay are welcome to join us for lunch, and we thank you.